Drive Home Reviews podcast, where I review the movies that I have just seen as I'm driving home from the theater. And you know, sometimes I really miss the 80s.
This was the 80s, man. There were no helmets. It was a wild...
It's the 80s. Do a lot of coke and vote for Ronald Reagan.
Invest in arbitrage and read J. McInerney.
It was the 80s. Stuff got real.
Oh, man. Please don't ever stop being the 80s when my life is over.
It was the 80s.
You and your 80s.
Your precious 80s.
You know, it would have continued to be the 70s if not for you.
Yeah, the 80s. That decade of big hair, crazy makeup, crazier outfits, and that was just on the heavy metal bands. That era when rampant commercialism masqueraded as children's programming to such an extent that people of my generation so deeply internalized it that we still weep when a talking truck dies.
Do not grieve. Soon, I shall be one with the Matrix.
And I also think that the 80s was kind of the premier decade for action films, just because it felt like you could get away with a lot in 80s action movies. The decade was so cocaine-filled and steroid-popping that, you know, even the stupidest concepts somehow managed to find their way to an audience, and in some cases, you know, became so beloved that they spawned massive fandoms and franchises. Let's be honest here. And I know I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off for saying this, but if The Terminator had starred anybody else but Arnold Schwarzenegger, it would be featured on Mystery Science Theater 3000. You know, let's be honest. If nothing else about the movie changed but the star, it'd be an MST3K film. No doubt about it in my mind. Yeah, the 80s loved buddy cops. They loved big muscly men and the interactions thereof. They loved screaming chiefs and, you know, crazy martial arts wielding bad guys. It was the prime decade for action films. And I bring all this up because watching The Wrecking Crew, I really did get a sense of 80s nostalgia. Not that this was necessarily a trying to capture the 80s magic, but it definitely felt like that was baked into its DNA from a conception stage. It would not surprise me to find out that the writers, directors, producers of this film made it basically because they also loved 80s action movies and wanted to make one with an early 21st century mentality. And how did they do? Honestly, pretty damn good. Of the three movies I've watched so far this year, this is the one I had the most fun watching, and the one that I can actually say I wasn't completely bored by. So let's talk a little bit about it. So first of all, just in case you didn't know, the story of this one is you have two estranged brothers, as played by Dave Bautista and Jason Momoa, who are brought back together when their private detective father is killed, and it turns out he was deep into some terrible conspiracy going on the island that has to deal with a unscrupulous land developer, the Yakuza, various other local gangs in Hawaii, and for some reason, Governor Jango Fett. And so these two estranged brothers have to come together, work out their their differences in the most manliest way possible in order to bring their family back together and avenge their father and expose the evil. And yeah, this sounds like the makeup of just about every 80s buddy cop film out there. And you know what? That's fine. Again, one of the great things about a simple setup is that it allows for the characters and the actors to bring their own personal spin to it. Oddly enough, I'm going to say this. This is another kind of tip-off to me that that this movie was very heavily inspired by the 80s. 80s movies have a simple concept, but surprisingly complex plots. Like, you can explain the concept of the Terminator, and a machine comes back in time to kill the future mother of its enemy. Okay, fine. But then you get into the mythology and everything, and the actual inner workings of everything, and it becomes much, much, much more convoluted. Look at Twins. I love the movie Twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito, but as opposed to just saying, yeah, they're brothers and they just don't look anything alike and that's the joke, no, there has to be this deeply convoluted and confusing sci-fi plot about an experiment to make the perfect person. They had 9 fathers, and there's this engine they're smuggling. It's all. And I think when you get into this movie, yeah, the basic setup is pretty direct, but then they try to get into the mystery and the intertwining of who's doing what and what villains are working for who and why people are doing the things they're doing. And yeah, it gets pretty convoluted. Also, the obvious villain can be the villain in the end. But again, if you're watching this for the plot, that's like saying you watched Baywatch for the plot, all right? And that's not there for that. Again, you're given this basic structure, and you hope that the charisma of the cast and the creativity of what you can do with a story like that will cover it up. And I think this one really succeeds there. I think the best thing this movie has going for it is it has a really superb cast. This is a great cast, a surprising cast in some cases. You know, along with Dave Bautista and Jason Momoa, you've got Jacob Batalon from the Marvel Spider-Man films, who I didn't recognize at first. I'm still not used to him with the shaved head, and he's lost a lot of weight, so he didn't quite look the same. You have Marina Baccarin in this, and I always forget. I was introduced to her on Firefly, so when I think of her, I always think of her as this like exquisite, almost ethereal kind of beauty, and she is a very beautiful woman, but I forget just how much ass she can kick in her own right. Like, she's a pretty badass action star herself, as seen by a lot of movies she's done since, and series she's done since. She's in this as Jason Momoa's love interest. You have, again, Django / Boba Fett, who played Jason Momoa's father in the Aquaman movies and now is playing his uncle. I really do this is another thing I really appreciate. I like the diversity of this cast. I like that it is an action movie set in Hawaii with actual Polynesian actors and Latinas and Japanese actors. It is a very diverse cast, and it works. I never felt like I was being pandered to. It's a great showing, and I don't know, I'd be very interested to hear what actual people of Polynesian descent or Hawaiian natives, what they think of it and how it represents them. From a very, ignorant of the culture, middle-aged heterosexual white guy, I can tell you that I really enjoyed the diversity, and I enjoyed the cultural aspects of it that were kind of intertwined through the film. So I think that gave it a much different flavor than other films of this ilk. And we've got to give big props, of course, to our two leads and both producers of the film, which it should probably surprise no one to find out. Dave Bautista and Jason Momoa. I'm always kind of 50-50 on Jason Momoa, because it's like sometimes I see him in things and I'm like, man, this guy is just really good, and other times I see him in things and I'm like, okay, this guy's shtick is getting tired. And to be fair, he is playing the Jason Momoa type, that really big, really tough, kind of chubby, frat boy dude bro. That is the Jason Momoa type. And hey, I have no objection to you grabbing on to a type and playing it. Hell, that's what Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's been doing, and he's one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood. More on him in a second. And sometimes I think that shtick works, but I really believe, and I'm going to use another wrestling analogy here, I believe that Jason Momoa is a great tag team wrestler. You know what I mean? He's like the Billy Gunn of acting, in that he is real. When he has a good partner to work off of, it balances him. When he doesn't have as good of a partner, it's weak. Billy Gunn is one of the greatest tag team wrestlers of all time, because he made it work with so many different people. Actually, I guess probably a better analogy would be James Storm, because James Storm had two of the greatest tag teams of the early 2000s in America's Most Wanted and Beer Money, and yeah, he won tag team titles with other people, but when he had someone that balanced him out and that he worked well with, it was magic. When he didn't, it was just like, okay, and that's Jason Momoa. Example, I think Jack Black is fine, but I don't think Jack Black was a good balance for him in the Minecraft movie. I just don't think it worked. But Dave Bautista balances him out. And I have said this before on this show, and I'm going to say it again, because I just remain to be impressed every time I see this. I do think that Dave Bautista is the greatest wrestler to actor we have ever seen. The Rock is the greatest wrestler to movie star. Bautista is an actor. And he's a good actor. And he really takes his role in this. His character is kind of the centerpiece. He's the head of the family. He's the oldest brother. He's the one with the wife and the kids, the solid job, So he's more than just a badass. He's, the badass Papa Bear. So he has to be kind of everyone's, centerpiece, the fixed point. And he understands that, and he plays it really, really well. He gets what his role is when he's having a scene with his wife, when he's having a scene with Stephen Root, when he's having a scene with a villain, when he's having a scene with Jacob Batalon, and he knows what his role is when he's having a scene with Jason Momoa, is to balance him. And the two of them have really, really good chemistry. They feel like brothers. They really do. And I like that they have enough of the kind of modern day calling out of toxic masculinity. There's this great scene where Batista's wife chews them both out for all of their shit, while still balancing it with that 80 dude bro, hyper masculinity. how do these two guys solve their problems? Of course they have a fight and beat the shit out of each other, because that's what they do. But it works. It really, really does. Also on that, I think that's a good way to kind of segue. The action scenes in this are pretty damn fun. I'm not going to say they're great. I've seen better. But they are pretty damn fun. They do a lot with the setup, with the location, with the different skill sets. There's a kind of, I think, the centerpiece of the film is this chase scene down a Hawaiian highway with a helicopter and guys on bikes, and you've got our four big name actors, Jason Momoa, Dave Bautista, Jacob Batalon, and Marina Baccarin, all in the minivan, and they're all doing their thing. She's driving. The two of them are, having gunfights and fistfights with motorcycles, drivers, and Jacob Batalon's hacking. Everybody's kind of doing their thing all at once, and it really does. It relies a little bit too much on some not very convincing green screen, but the end result is still a lot of fun. They make the most out of what they've got. They know how the director and the script utilizes the strong points of the people involved to make the story work. I would also say that I think one of the highlights of the film is the scene where the two of them are working through their daddy issues, which are kind of ill-defined. I'm not sure. There's a backstory of something, and it's never really well explained as to why Jason Momoa left the island and all this. But anyway, but they're having their fist fight, let's figure shit out moment. And I actually thought it was pretty good. It was hard-hitting. They're both getting some good punches in, and you see kind of, it worked. That's the kind of thing that can feel very, very tacked on and very, very weak, if not done well. And I think it was. I thought that was a very effective scene. Who else is in this who's really good is noted character actor Stephen Root, probably best known as the voice of Bill and Buck Strickland in King of the Hill, is in this as the police officer he's like the chief. In an 80s action movie, kind of what the purpose of the chief kind of is.
You busted up that crack house pretty bad, McGonagall. Did you really have to break so much furniture?
You think Brian's taking a holiday? We'll think again!
You're off the case, McGonagall.
You're off your case, Chief.
Wait a minute! I'm the captain here. I do all the yelling.
Well, McGonagall, Billy is dead. They slit his throat from ear to ear.
Don't be so fast to thank me on this, Luca, because you're going to be naked on this one. It's on the line for you. People are going to be watching. Now, you blow it, you're going down. You screw up, you're going to be hung out to dry. You drop the ball, you're going to be left twisted in the wind. If you're embarrassed this department, your parents will be dancing with figs. Is that clear?
And he does that very, very well. But I like that he's more than that. He's not just the guy brought in to yell at them and, tell you, give me your badge, McClintock or whoever. But he actually does have affection for them. You can see it's kind of like a father figure looking out for them and scolding them when they need it. I was worried that the movie was going to go very predictable and make him like a corrupt cop who had something to do with their father's death, and they didn't. They didn't do that. I appreciated that they actually let him be just actually a good guy whom they kind of push back on, but they don't ever disrespect. It's not ever a thing. He's not like Dennis Franz in Die Hard 2, where he's a guy that you kind of want to see John McClane take the air out of. So yeah, I think if the cast and the story has a weak spot, I think it's the main villain, the main antagonist, who is, he's not good. He's not memorable. With these two guys, you needed someone really. I kind of feel like all the heavies didn't get what they, like, as good as they could have been. Like, they had they had a cast of guys, like they had a guy who looked a lot like John Cena, you know, that Jason Momoa even calls Fat John Cena, and like I kind of wanted to see him and Batista fight, you know. They had a member of the Yakuza. I don't know, I can never remember his name, but he had a great look. He had like a scar across the bottom of his face. Very, very thin in comparison to Batista and Momoa. So when he and Batista have their final fight, you know, it's a neat contrast of this big hulking dude versus this smaller, faster dude. And they had the main bad guy who I don't know anything about and didn't care about because he wasn't interesting. So in other words, they had like this great rogues gallery that looked great, but they didn't give them any time to do anything or for us to get to know them, to even like them. Well, that is something they kind of missed out on from 80s villains, is you usually had bad guys in there that were very recognizable, did a lot, and had a good look, like a wrestling heel, that the audience knew was the bad guy, but also kind of dug because they looked cool. And they really didn't do anything with them. They had them, but they didn't utilize them right. And I think you could have cut out some of the extra stuff in here and put a little bit more of the villains and pumped them up a bit more to make the ending more satisfying, personally. But yeah, I don't want to oversell this or make it sound like this is some kind of glorious, you know, outstanding film that's going to change your life. It's not any of that. It's a fun popcorn action movie, one that I wish they had released in theaters, because this is one that you do want to go to the movie theater, get your popcorn, get your soda, and be like, yeah, you know, yeah, action. You know, yeah, it is kind of one of those movies. And big ups. I really have a hard time knowing that so many of our major film studios, our storied film studios, are now owned by internet companies and streaming services. I hate that they call it Amazon, MGM. I hate that. I hate that. I hate that. But I will give them credit is that they didn't shoehorn in a lot of product placement like they did in War of the Worlds. They didn't like go, whoa, luckily I ordered this from Amazon and the drone got here just in time for the final battle. You know, they didn't do any of that shit. So, you know, as much as I hate Amazon MGM, I do appreciate that they didn't use it to pimp their stuff. Excuse me. So yeah, I do think, like I said, I saw 2 movies on Netflix. Neither one was of any real, you know, nothing really to write home about. And this one on Amazon, and I really enjoyed it. I had fun watching it, and that's what this movie is meant to be. And as much as I think the over-sequelization and franchise mentality can be a downside, this is one that the cast is good. The interactions are fun. The characters are strong. This is one that it's like, I would like to see them back again. I'd like to see a Wrecking Crew 2. You know, I'd like to see where they go with the story and have these guys do more. And yeah, I really think it's a fun movie. Maybe they could actually bring in The Rock in that one, or John Cena, or Roman Reigns. You know, that'd be kind of funny. But yeah, I did like this one, and yeah, I think it's the best example of exactly what it's set out to be, which is all you can really ask for in a movie like this. So, all right, let's wrap this up, because I don't really think there's anything else I need to touch on in terms of this film. So final grade for The Wrecking Crew, I'm giving it a solid B+. Solid B+. Fun movie. Fun movie, a little slow in spots, but other than that, and not the greatest set of rogues in the world, but, you know, our main characters really come together and make it work, and it's a fun experience. So yeah, I'd say check this one out. It's a good time. All right, so there you have it. Eventually, I'm hoping that they will release something actually in the theater, because I haven't been in a movie theater in a long time, and I'm very sad about that. I want to go see an actual movie, but gotta wait for them to actually release something I want to look at. But at any rate, here we go. So finally, a good one. Thank you for coming along. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time, and as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.